Hey guys, I hope you're well. My name is Kristin Gorter. I am Director of Connections at Emergence. In today's devotional, I want to share with you verses that I have really been dwelling a lot on this week, and I hope we can all gain something from them. In her book, These Strange Ashes, Elizabeth Elliott said, "Of one thing I am perfectly sure, God's story never ends in ashes." Those words have been on repeat in my mind this past week, not only because of what they say, but because of who said them. Elizabeth Elliott was an incredible champion of faith. You may have heard of her, but in case you haven't, she and her husband Jim Elliott worked as missionaries in Ecuador, where he was speared to death along with 4 others by the very people they were trying to reach. 2 years later, Elizabeth returned with her daughter to the place that her husband had been killed and lived among and shared the gospel with those responsible for her husband's death. Years later, after she had returned to the States, she married a second time. Yet her new husband ended up dying of cancer only a couple of years later. I share all this with you because Elizabeth knew what it was like to live through the fire, yet she also knew that it wasn't the end of the story. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus told his followers, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it." That's Matthew 16:24 and 25. This is what makes the gospel so radical and so difficult to walk in. It's the upside down kingdom. Everything about this statement to the world seems backwards. After all, phrases like "every man for himself" and "survival of the fittest" roll off our tongues. But Christ didn't seek to save himself. Instead, he became like a servant. Philippians 2:3-8 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross." I have heard it said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. These past few weeks have been a bit of a roller coaster ride of emotions and experiences for most of us. We have been asked to give up our lives as we knew them and strip away things that once brought us a lot of comfort and joy. It's tempting to become wrapped up in ourselves and wish for our time or our space, our favorite foods, our vacations, or even our schedules. What would it look like to take up our cross during this time? What would it look like to truly put others before ourselves? Elizabeth Elliott also said, "To be a follower of the crucified means, sooner or later, a personal encounter with the cross. And the cross always entails loss. The great symbol of Christianity means sacrifice, and no one who calls himself a Christian can evade this stark fact." But she goes on to say all the scriptural metaphors about the death of the seed that falls into the ground, about losing one's life, about becoming the least in the kingdom, about the world's passing away. All these go on to something unspeakably better and more glorious. Loss and death are only the preludes to gain and life. Colossians 3:1-4 says, "Even you have been raised with Christ. Seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth, for you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory." This week, when you feel the weight of loss, when the sacrifices feel like too much to bear, remember that God's world never ends in ashes, but there is hope and life in following Christ.